Good morning, everyone. We'll just give it a moment to allow a few more people to trickle in. Great. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, part 2 of Security Certificates 101, presented by David and Nick. Before we begin, I want to thank you all for participating in today's webcast and for your support of IAUG. To our current members and those that are now new members by means of joining us today, I encourage you to visit iaug.org to get more information about how to get the most out of your membership, including upcoming events such as this one, IAUG Councils, which I know Nick will talk a little bit more about later, committees, as well as a library of online content. I have 3 quick housekeeping items to go over. First, today's webinar will be recorded and available for all of you on demand. Second, a Q&A session will follow today's presentation, but in the meantime, you can add all questions into the Q&A window in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. Third, there will be a short evaluation that pops up as you exit the webinar. Please take the time to fill it out and let us know what you thought of today's session and what you may like to see going forward. I'm going to go ahead and get us started and turn it over to our presenters for today.
Awesome. Hey, just a quick check. Everybody can see my screen okay? Yes?
Oh, yeah, we got you.
Awesome. Nick, dude, we're back. 2 weeks. 2 weeks. And I hopefully gave everybody a bit of time to digest the cool content from your session. And now we're going to do a little bit deeper dive on this one, going into, okay, how does this really affect our world in the Avaya ecosystem, which is going to help reinforce the basic stuff. The good news is, certificates are pretty universal. So, if you can figure it out for one set of applications, you've kind of got it figured out for all of those applications. So this should be a really good session to reinforce that information. But hey, in case you don't know who we are, my name is Dave Lover. I am president of Intentional Technologies. You may know me from previous roles as CTO of Cross Telecom Aero Electronics / SI. I worked for C1 or Converge One. I've worked for Avaya, all of that kind of good stuff. Nick, why don't you give us a little bit of intro on yourself?
Yep. So I'm Nick Kwiatkowski. I'm the manager of the Unified Communications team at Michigan State University. I'm also an adjunct professor within the College of Communication Arts and Sciences at Michigan State University. Some of my course load there does include network security, cloud computing, data networking, all that fun stuff.
That's kind of awesome. To give you a little bit of reminder as to what we're doing, this is actually part 2. So, I haven't gone through to make sure, hey, did everybody attend part 1? If you're good on certs, in general, the theory there, that's what we kind of covered in part 1, and I think we went into some pretty good detail and kind of best practices and use cases for how we do that. Again, in part 2, we're going to go into more of the Avaya environment, and this is a good news, bad news story. Yeah, right. I think, yes, Avaya supports security certificates and the whole TLS PKI infrastructure, but there's some things that you're like, okay, well, it would have been nice if they'd be a little bit more consistent in their deployment. And okay, hey, how about we do this in more of an automated way? There's some automation, which we're going to talk about in there, and some there just isn't. So we're going to show you that. We're going to pick a handful of devices. But, obviously we can't cover everything because it is still only a 1-hour session. But this will give you I think, some pretty good information to level set and to remind people, because hey, it's been 2 weeks, you had time to digest. You also had 2 weeks to forget. So let's very quickly. We're really talking about, when we say certificates, we're really talking about 2 different kinds of certificates. There's a trust cert or a root cert, and I know I will, use those 2 words interchangeably, trust and root. When you hear those 2 words, they're the same thing, right? They ultimately define who's allowed to sign certs and really who do you trust. That's why we like the word trust. is yes, it's at the root of the chain, but it's who it establishes that trust factor of if I have a certificate given to me by a certificate authority, that is their trust cert, their root cert, and therefore, oh, I trust anything that certificate authority creates and signs. And what do they create and sign? Well, they create identity certs. And those are the things that are typical. We'd say we put it on a server, but technically under the covers of that, we're putting it on a service on a server. And what I mean by that is there might actually be a whole bunch of different services running on a server. There might be a web browser. Well, there might be some applications under the covers. There might be some specific flows. And typically, each one of those might get a different security certificate, an identity cert. And so, you have that. The root cert, you can kind of, what's really super interesting about those is they're generic, right? They don't define a specific website or a DNS a domain or anything like that. A root cert is just defining who the certificate authority is. We rarely change those. And by rarely, I mean, that's pretty rare. We're talking, upwards of 10 plus years between when you have to think about renewing those. Sometimes you have to renew them because you change your certificate authority and you use somebody else. Well, now, okay, I'm going to have to go get their root certificate. But that's in contrast to an identity cert where, oh my God, we're changing that all the time. And I'll say by all the time, it used to be 3 years. Most currently, it's every 1 year, and this
And
gets some of the interesting perspectives of it. Kind of depends on if it's a public cert or a private cert. Like, did you generate it internally, or is it using externally somewhere else? But a year is pretty common. It's getting shorter by the minute, and they're talking down to every 3 months, maybe down to every 1 month, that kind of thing. Nick, I heard you chiming in maybe.
yeah, and yeah, we're really talking about 6 months realistic for anything that is public facing. So when you're internal and you know that you can trust certain devices, services, all that type of stuff, it's really um it can be longer, but you're going to start running into fights between browsers, between other devices that won't accept cert lengths that are over a certain amount of time, and that's quickly becoming a thing. We can thank mostly our friends at Apple for doing that. But and the other thing I want to mention with this slide right here is a cert really is just a cert. Identity certs and root and trust certs are physically the same thing. They are the same file type. They are the same bits of data, all that type of stuff. It's just a matter of who do you trust, and that entire trust thing. Definitely, if this is new to you, take a look at our part one, because we dove into, I think, for almost 45 minutes just about trust.
Yeah,
But that's going to kind of play into the rest of this presentation here.
agreed.
So while we're quickly doing this review here, like I mentioned, there is the Unified Communications Council. They do have their meeting here this afternoon. They're going to have the entire hour strictly about certificates. So if you're already part of the UC Council, join them if you want to have more of this discussion. Otherwise, definitely join that council and the other ones that we have as well. Yeah.
That is awesome. Thank you, Nick. So, question is, how do we use certs in the Avaya environment? And again, like I said, it's the same things that we use certs everywhere else. It's to provide proof of identity, like, hey, am I really going to my session manager, or could I be accidentally going to somebody else's session manager? But it also handles the encryption between the two. So when you look at that at a kind of a device level, we might literally be talking end user devices. Maybe that's a hard phone. Maybe that's a soft phone. It could be how different servers talk to each other. Like when system manager wants to send a configuration down to session manager, that's encrypted. We use TLS for that. So it requires certificates. And there's a bunch of different kinds of things that are happening, all of the communications, whether it's secure SIP, whether it's secure H.323 or 248. All of those things have adopted this encryption model. that uses that. So the beauty is, hey, it's the same kind of a thing that we use everywhere else in the universe. And so, there are obviously little nuances with Avaya, but it's mostly the same thing. So the starting point of all of this is we have to pick a strategy. And because there's a lot of different ways we can do this. It all has the same, I need a certificate authority and I need to put identity certs on stuff. And the question is, well, which certificate authority am I going to use? And you may have choices, and sometimes you may not have choices. Maybe your IT security team says, no, this is how you will do it, period, end of story, and you don't have much of an option. And that's totally okay. The good news is, I love that model because, hey, I can let them deal with all of this stuff, right? And I'll tell them when I need a new cert, and then I just go put it on my stuff. Um, but then there might be other scenarios that, some of the automation that Avaya has built into that comes in when we can use System Manager as a certificate authority, the one creating and signing certificates. So that can help us, right? So we'll talk about these options, right? And then we'll kind of talk about, at the end of the day, the answer is going to be you might use a couple of these different strategies kind of at the same time for things that, as Nick alluded to before, things that are inside your network and will never have anybody on the outside looking at it, like your session manager to system manager. There's nobody on the public internet that is ever going to need to see any of that kind of communication. However, when your remote worker SIP hard phone needs to talk to session manager, that's now public. So we may find that we've got different strategies depending on the zones that we need to deal with, to kind of, either make it inexpensive or make it easier to deal with, or just kind of the logical approach. But, so we'll talk about some of these. The first one is where the old school, this was Avaya attempting to do everybody a favor by saying, hey, nobody in the Avaya world really knows what a cert is. How about we just create a generic one? And we'll throw it on all of our stuff and we'll get everything functioning. It's all encrypted, and Bob's your uncle. And the problem with that is people got really lazy, and it's got some serious flaws. Again, good intentions in the beginning, but kind of enabled us to not handle this in a great way. The big thing, these are not unique certs, right? Everybody and their brother has them, which means they've been compromised a long time ago. They're not secure. They do not meet NIST standards. And good news is, Avaya is finally not going to be renewing these certs. Once they expire, they're dead forever. Which, by the way, they have expired. So, but I still run into old systems where people haven't touched them in a long time, and they're still running these really old, crappy certs that kind of scare me. But
So
I want you, yeah, Nick.
so yeah, the dangerous thing to for people to realize with this setup is every Avaya piece of gear has the exact same private cert or a private key on it. Meaning I could go talk to David Lover's Avaya communication manager server, take my private key and decrypt all his data. That's decrypting all the traffic in flight. That's decrypting anything that's stored at rest. Meaning, I essentially have the keys to his castle, and I could walk into any other company that is using those demo certs as well. So, if let's say you're a large Fortune 500 company, you've decided to deploy out the Avaya, their demo certs. I literally can take anything you have and decrypt it within your environment. So keep that in mind. While technically, yes, things are encrypted and trust is built with this, it becomes essentially a non-issue to be able to decrypt that data in real time.
The next option we have, right, to who's going to create and sign these certs, these identity certs, is to use your existing certificate authority that your own company already has, right? They're already deploying internal certs, private certs. They're not public certs. They're created internally. They function just like a normal cert, and there's a lot of benefits to this, right? The chances are pretty good that certificate authority's root cert has been deployed to all of the devices in the enterprise, either by, through Active Directory or various domain policies or, all kinds of different things, to distribute certs in a somewhat automated way. Um, it also lets lets your enterprise manage the acquisition of the certs for you. So it's nothing you have to deal with. Disadvantages, hey, you're going to lose some of the automatic cert acquisition by enrolling with System Manager. If you've ever spun up a session manager yourself, one of the tasks in the installation process is to enter the enrollment password. And that's basically saying, oh, hey, I can just automatically go to System Manager, have it create a cert for me and give it to me. Well, you lose that if you're not using System Manager as your certificate authority. By default, hey, no one outside of your enterprise is going to trust these certs, all right? So you have to now find a way to distribute them. You have to go back to your IT department and say, hey, I've got my own certificate authority over here. That you might do that. I suppose that they're already distributing it from the enterprise CA, so that's probably not a big deal. But it does require coordination, with your enterprise certificate team, and could have higher deployment costs. The other scenario that we're kind of alternately referring to is, well, what if I use my system manager for this, right? So system manager has a thing built into it that can allow it to be a certificate authority. And so you get that automatic enrollment for some of Avaya's devices, not all of them. Why they didn't kind of make that a universal thing, no one has any idea. But it doesn't do it for every single device. And we'll show you examples of that, where hey, session manager, I'll show you how it's super easy to update the cert. And then, my God, a gateway, an H.248 gateway, like a G450, that's kind of a pain to create and get your certs done. We'll show you those examples. And these certs are not distributed by default to your enterprise users. So, you might have to, again, talk to your IT department and say, hey, I've got my own certificate authority over here. Could you go distribute my root certs for me the same way you do the enterprise certs? And again, same way with the public users. Not typically easily done unless you've got some MDM solution, or maybe you're doing this via your 46xx settings file. It's not as plug and play as some of the other scenarios. Another interesting scenario is you can use System Manager as the intermediate certificate authority, meaning I could say, hey, IT guys, you have your enterprise certificate authority. Would you give me permission to create certs on your behalf? So now I get to use some of the automation, within the enrolled devices with System Manager, but at the same time, my root cert is still my enterprise cert. And as long as we've got that chain in there that describes, hey, I've got my enterprise, I've got my intermediate, I'm in good shape. So this is popular. Again, your enterprise may say, I'm not letting you create certs with my signature on them. So it turns into more of a politics thing than a technical thing. But if your IT department's like, yeah, hey, let's do it, as long as you let me help you with that and make sure your system manager is signing those certs on our behalf correctly, we might be in great shape. So again, some interesting scenarios there. The last scenario we're going to talk about is, well, what if I don't want to use anything internally, to sign these certs? I want something out in the wild. And while that may sound like, oh my gosh, do I really want to do that? The answer is yes, because in a lot of scenarios, you have to do this. A lot of publicly facing things. The advantage of using a third party or a public cert, and when I think of that, I'm thinking of VeriSign. I'm thinking, there's a whole bunch of them. There's Let's Encrypt, right? There's a whole bunch of very popular third-party public certificates. And the beauty is those trust certs, are automatically installed in a lot of the modern operating systems. Like when you get various patches and they say, "Oh, we're updating security things." Yes, they might be patching bugs, but you may also just be automatically getting the most current versions of those certificate authorities trust certs. So they're just already baked into all of the clients. They're your web browsers, your even Avaya's hard phones, like the 96 X1 series hard phones, or the 90, what is it, the J179s, the J series, have a lot of those certs, trust certs built in to automatically trust. So that's pretty cool. That makes life a whole lot easier because my mom has the certs automatically to trust any of the identity certs that come from those public certificate authorities. Disadvantages, they're short. They're 1 year and getting shorter. We're talking, as Nick said, the next standard that's coming out is going to drop down to 6 months, and then we're even hearing 3 months and 2 months and 1 month. We're not there yet. Today, the standard is still 1 year, but that's what it is. And to get a year cert, those can be expensive, especially if you have a whole bunch of them, individual identity certs. Sometimes we fix that with what's called a wild card cert, where we say, hey, give me cover all of my sub domains or my various FQDNs. Um, Again, like the enterprise cert, we lose automatic cert acquisition. System manager or session manager can't enroll with a third-party cert, so that becomes problematic. And not all certificate authorities support the requirements of certain Avaya servers. Just communication manager is a good example where it needs some very specific things in the cert that are not typical at all. And you might not be able to get that from a third-party cert. So again, as we talked about before, this is where, hey, maybe from all my public stuff, anything outside the SBC in the public wild, where Dave Lover's at home on his phone with his workplace app, that might connect in using public certs from a public certificate authority. And then when everything gets back in, the session border controller's sole purpose in life is like, oh, hey, we're going to change that link or that communication to use internal or private certs once it gets on the inside. So some pretty cool things. Nick, what kind of in your real life use of all this stuff, what do you find to be most common and most popular?
It's really going to be the hybrid approach. So what I'm seeing and what most customers that I'm talked to see, generally it's you have a public cert that is on your outward facing things. So that's typically going to be your session border controller, maybe public certs on things like the voicemail external interface, that type of stuff. But everything that's on your inside, you then use System Manager. And a lot of that is because of that automation and the ability for you to create certs on your own. One thing that David mentioned there with hey, some third-party certs charge money. Most of the ones charge money per certificate. You go to Entrust directly, I think it's like $75 a year. You can get if you go to GoDaddy, I think it's only like $5 or $10. But when you start talking about, hey, you've got 25 media gateways, you've got all these servers, that starts adding up pretty quick, especially as you're trying to change those out every year. And then starting in March, it's going to be every 6 months, and then follow in another year, it's going to be 3 months. Like all of a sudden, that starts adding up, and that's a lot of time and energy. Where you can utilize System Manager to kind of like push some of that for you.
So in the grand scheme of all of this, we have a flow, and I'm going to try to keep everybody on track for where we are in that flow as how we're going to actually do this in real life. So high level, all this assumes we have our strategy identified and we know what we're going to do, and we have our process or our plan in place that could take a while, right? So you certainly don't want to wait till the last minute on any of these things. We're going to go through these kind of steps. We're going to, one, kind of perform an inventory. And that's a pretty big statement right there, because you've got to figure out where are all of the devices, where are all of the certs, what servers are they on. Again, each server may have multiple certs. And so we have to be aware of that. We have to know which ones we're going to need. if we're making a change here, like if this is the first time we're changing our strategy, well, now I've got to get the root cert off of that certificate authority. Whoever we've decided to be the certificate authority, get the root cert, and we got to load that baby on everything we can. And all that does is say to those devices, hey, I now want you to trust any identity cert that you see that this certificate authority, as proven by this trust cert, whatever they've signed, whatever they create, I want you to believe that that's fact, that that's good, it's pure, it's wholesome, and it's trustworthy. Okay, and if you do that out of order, if you start changing identity certs, yet you missed a server, and that server is going to be like, whoa, who the heck is that? I don't believe that. And literally the communications will break and that server will fail. That service won't work the way you expected it to. So a big important thing is make sure all of your devices trust your new certificate authority. And that's as simple as getting that certificate authority's root cert put on everything, all right, in their trust store. Once you have that, now we can go start making all these creating and signing all of these individual identity certs, whether they're public, whether they're private, and get those on each of the appropriate devices. Um, and the way we do that, in some scenarios, is we'll create what's called a CSR. And Nick talked about that in that first week. It's a certificate signing request. It's basically saying, I'm a device. I would like you to create me a cert and sign it and then give it back to me. That's a CSR. So we'll have to go through and create, on every device. And again, there's some automation that we get that we'll talk about, but we're going to hit all the CSR oriented devices first. Create the CSR, send it to the system manager's certificate authority, and then we're going to get that cert back, right? Because they will have signed it, and then we're going to go install those new signed identity certs and actually install them on the various devices and services. And we're going to do that for everything. In here, our session, we're going to take 3 or 4 different devices, different types of servers, and we try to find some of the most common ones that you might have to deal with. And then the question is, hey, you want to put your money where your mouth is? And do you know for sure that you did this right? Remove the old certificate authority trust cert. And because that'll tell those devices, hey, stop trusting the old certificate authority, stop trusting those old demo certs. And if all of a sudden somehow you missed something, you're going to find out pretty quick because stuff's not going to work. So removing the old one is the final check of, okay, you remove it and everything still works. Assuming everything had time to sync up and do its thing, you're living the dream. You are officially secure in what you're trying to accomplish. And we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna go through those. So starting with an inventory, I don't want to make light of this because this is a very complex task of going through all of your stuff. And you can see I even, snagged an old slide here, but you've got your system managers and your session managers. You've got your presence, you've got communication manager, you've got your SBCs, you've got your gateways, you've got your branch session managers, all of those things in these applications, which embarrassingly I still show as 1X, and you get the idea that there's a lot of stuff, old and new, that you have to just make sure you're aware of what those are. And you can see on some of these devices, they've got multiple certs, maybe one for the SIP communication itself, and maybe one for the signaling, or the SIP is signaling, but maybe like the web browser aspect of System Manager, right? System Manager has a web interface and it has a kind of a behind the scenes link to all the devices. Those are 2 different certs. So we just have to be aware of those and what they look like. So how we start with that, let's go get, our trust cert, if you will, and what does that end up looking like? So, in System Manager, which is where is where their certificate authority is, I'm going to go into that, and I can start looking at that stuff, right? And I can see what certs are where. And this is kind of showing, in this case, an identity cert. But it's an example of in System Manager, what I'm actually looking at here is the Session Manager. And what is that? Where is that? What does that look like? I have tools that can help me, right? I can go into Session Manager as an example because a lot of the SIP communications goes through Session Manager, and they do a very good job of identifying all of the secure links. And so there's a menu item in here. You go to system status and security module status, and I can start seeing, what some of those links are, and it'll tell me, hey, is this current? What does this look like? And so I can get some insight as to what some of the links are that are coming through, in this case, Session Manager.
Back on that last slide there, you don't show it on this table here, but under the details show, it'll actually show you what certificate is being presented to System Manager or the different session managers that device is using. So again, you can go through every link going to, let's say, a session manager and figuring out what certs are the devices presenting to it. So you, again, can build that inventory and not miss random links of adjuncts and that type of stuff.
Yeah, again, it doesn't show you everything because not everything goes through Session Manager, but boy, there's a lot of stuff that goes through Session Manager. And so it's kind of a great way. Again, these are just ways that you can start helping with your inventory of, okay, where's all the stuff I have? And some of the things you probably forgot about, some of the things you didn't even know you had. And so we're looking for all these clues as to where the stuff is. Document along the way so that you don't have to do this again next time, right? In a year or in 6 months or in 3 years, whatever you set that expiration to be. But these are some of the tools that give you that ability. So now the idea is, hey, let's get the root certificate off of the certificate authority, wherever that is. And for some of these, I'm just going to show you an example of System Manager. For some of the public ones, literally you can go to their website and say, hey, give me the trust cert. Or typically when you get, like if I'm doing something through the enterprise, or even if I'm getting a third party public cert, I'm usually going through my internal team because there's somebody who owns the relationship with VeriSign, for example. And I might have them go get me the certs. And usually what they give you back is a copy of those, not only the identity cert that you need, but they'll usually give you a copy of the root cert. So you'll have both of everything that you need to do. But again, let's assume that we're using System Manager as our certificate authority. Okay.
So really quick on that last slide though. So a couple things I wanted to point out on here is installing new root certs and all that type of stuff. 9 times out of 10, I would say probably 95 times out of 100 is not service impacting. It's not going to be one of those things where you have to worry about, oh, I do this thing here, now my server needs to reboot and that type of stuff. Generally, installing new trust does not do that. The only exception that I generally run into is going to be on older versions of SIP and H323 phones, particularly the 4600 series phones and 9600 series phones. If you have a J series phone that is a modern firmware, those phones will not require a reboot to get new trust. They'll need a new reboot when you start getting to the point of needing to install an identity cert if you end up doing that on the phones. But J series phones won't require that. Your servers, that's going to be the communication managers, it's going to be your session managers, it's going to be your SBCs, AESs, POMs, all that type of stuff. Generally won't require reboot to install new root CAs, and it's not going to be service impacting.
That is good info. And we'll try to talk about where we have seen things to be service impacting, because there's a bunch, especially if you've got older systems that might be, once we get to the identity cert part of this. So again, as we get into the second step, right, we need to go get that root cert, the trust cert, off of the certificate authority. So where is the certificate authority? Well, in System Manager, go to Services, go to Security. You can go to Certificates, and you can click on Authority, and that will bring up Avaya's integrated certificate authority that shows up in System Manager, right? Then there's a bunch of them they could use. They've used they've used a certificate authority model. They've implemented something. And there's a couple of different ways to get to this, but the one I always go to is just when you're on CA structure and CRLs. I can go and I can view the certificate, and I click that, and it'll give me some options. One of the things that I always do is say, okay, download the PEM file. So when I download the PEM file, it's just a text file. It's gonna, yeah, I think it defaults to .pem. It doesn't have to be. A lot of times I'll change it to .txt. The file name extension generally doesn't matter for this. Sometimes certain applications are looking for a specific extension. Great, rename it. It's just text, right? It's if you open it up, you can actually read it. But this is the trust cert. We're going to download that. Um, and again, you can open it up and look at it and see, hey, what are some of these things look like, but all of that should be pretty basic. Um, so then the question is, now that I have the root cert, as we said, we've got to get this root cert on everything before we even start thinking about identity certs. So let's start with some of those various things that you have in your world. For starters, maybe you have Communication Manager, right? And a lot of us have Communication Manager. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to get it into Communication Manager. We go into the server, the maintenance web page. We go to down at the bottom where it's the download files, and Nick and I were joking about this. What a weird name, download files, because it implies like I'm downloading it from the server. Nope, Avaya's chosen the language of this. It's downloading it from the perspective of Communication Manager. So I'm going to hit browse, and I'm gonna, whatever file name I pick, I'm gonna select it, and then I'm gonna say download. What that's actually doing is uploading it into Communication Manager in its kind of download repository. You do kind of have to remember those names because this doesn't do a great job of helping you see the list that is in the downloaded files. So in this case, I'm going to go in and I'm going to go over on the left to that under security, under trusted certificates. Remember, that's the trust certs. And I'm going to just say add. I want to add a trust cert. And as I mentioned, it doesn't give you a list of all of the things that it has in its download directory. So you have to remember, like, okay, I uploaded it as smgr.txt or whatever you named it as. Enter that and hit open. That's going to say, okay, great. I see what this is. What applications or what services that are running in Communication Manager? There are 4 of them. What do I want to use for this? Where do I want to put this trust store? Do I want to put on one of them or all of them? You can check all of those boxes for our purpose. Hey, I just want to do maybe the Communication Manager itself. I click that button and I hit add. And then from there, I would see that. And again, I got lazy and I didn't take a screenshot that showed my smgr.txt, but picture that would be in this list of trusted certs now. And to Nick's point, certain communication managers are going to need a reboot, right? And so, newer ones, they'll be good with that. But in this case, anything before Communication Manager 8.1 is going to need a restart. So, Nick, I think we talked about a system reset level 1 will cause that to happen.
Yeah, to get a new trust cert in there, to get it to be accepted, you have to do a reset system 1, which is a software low-level restart, but it's still a service. It could be service impacting.
Okay, thank you. So let's switch gears. Let's say we want to go to an AES server. Same kind of thing, and you're going to see similarities, although not exactness, between these, but you'll see some common things as we go through. Like, so when I go to the AES web portal, I can go under security. I can go to certificate management. I'm going to look at, again, the trusted certificates. Like, who am I going to trust? I'm going to click import. I'm going to go to that scenario, right? Or that this is going to pop up. I can click choose file. I can kind of pick what I'm going to, have this apply to. and then I'm going to hit apply, and then it's going to be in there. Okay, so again, I've added the trust cert to the trust repository, which might have a whole bunch of different trust certs, right, depending on where all of my certificates are coming from. But this is the one that's going to be important for us. So if we switch gears to System Manager, even though the certificate authority is loaded on System Manager, well, System Manager itself still needs certs, right? So it's going to kind of get it from that application that is loaded co-resident onto the System Manager. So to do that, we're going to go to Services, we're going to go to Inventory, we're going to go to Manage Elements, and in here we'll see all of the list of all of these. And Nick was kind enough to give me some of his screenshots for his system, where I can go in and manage the trusted certs. Same deal. I'm going to add a new trust cert, right? Uh, I can go in here and then kind of say, where do I want to apply it? Am I going to, pick a file, right? And then ultimately, retrieve that. I'm just going to kind of grab it and bring it into System Manager as a valid trust certificate. Nick, any
Now,
commentary on this slide?
yeah, so one interesting thing with this, so where you will probably need to import certs into System Manager and some of the corollary products from there, is, for example, the Avaya push service. So the service that's used to wake up Android phones, iPhones when a call comes in. So because you do actually have to import Avaya's PPM or the push service cert. So the other neat thing I like about this screenshot here is you can do like what we've been talking about, where you import that root cert into here and then just go. They also have this thing that says import using TLS. You can go type in a web address, IP address, or URL, and then the port number. System Manager will actually interrogate that using the TLS, the Open SSL program, and pull down the cert for you. So you don't actually have to manually go in there and find out what the root cert is and that type of stuff. But again, that's only going to be a function of System Manager and being able to push out to other DRS enabled certs. So like Session Manager, Branch Session Manager, Breeze, Presence, Oceana, and kind of sort of AADS.
Okay. Hey, let's not forget our endpoints, right? And the way we know we typically get things to endpoints are, 46xx settings files. Maybe that is your AADS. But we're going to have a magic line in there that says set trust certs, and it's just going to be a list. And we know that, if you're truly on a 46xx settings file, loaded on a web server of some kind, we'll just have to make sure that those files actually exist there. Because when the phone boots and goes through the 46xx settings.txt file, it'll get to this line and say, oh, I'm supposed to load up two different trust certs and put it in my trust store. And apparently they are named, this AV underscore SIPCA underscore PAM, blah, 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 and then system manager underscore CA.txt. So whatever names of those files are, it'll get to that point and then go grab those files off of your web server or your AADS server. Okay, so Nick?
The only thing to really note on this here is J series phones version 4.1.3 and later by default will trust anything that, let's just say, your Google Chrome or Firefox browser trust. So if you are getting one of the major certs from, let's say, Entrust or InCommon or something like that, you don't actually have to add these lines in there. The other thing to note on here too is older phones, so 9600 series, 4600 series, and older J series phones will not automatically pick up these changes on these 46xx settings files. So you will actually have to reboot all of these in order to get them to see the new certs.
Okay. Hey, yeah, there's more, right? Getting certs on a media server. You get the idea, right? In the spirit of time, I want to make sure that we're kind of running through these. And the beauty is this presentation can be made available, will be made available, so you can kind of get a head start on what some of these are. But hopefully you're noticing a pattern, right? Of, okay, how do I get them loaded? They all have similar terminology. They all have a trust store. They're referencing security certificate management kinds of things. And whenever you see trust, that's where they're looking for the trust cert or the root cert of the certificate authority. Um, BD Gateway is a little bit different, right? To do that, I'm going to use my USB port, right, and load up a USB thumb drive with that and kind of go in and just copy that into a specific place on that server. And same way, it'll get it in that same kind of scenario. Last, I think, but not least, we'll make it our last, is getting the Avaya for the SBC. Same thing, right? We're seeing TLS management, we're seeing certificates, we're seeing, hey, I want to install, and I'm going to say, hey, what are we installing? Turns out we're going to install a CA certificate. Again, they didn't call it a root or a trust cert, but when you hear the word CA or certificate authority cert, that's implying that that's what we're doing was with a trust cert. And we grab that, upload it, and away we go. This implies all of our stuff trusts all of these new identity certs that we're going to go get created. So to do that, we've got to generate the certs, and we often start with that with CSRs. So we're going to go through and again, communication manager. This is where things get a little different on all of these, but you'll see them all as CSR, a certificate signing request. You go into certificate signing request, you have a new request. We're going to fill out a form, that says, hey, all of these certs need things. Sometimes you can hit help and it'll be useful. Sometimes it won't. But this is where it gets into you kind of got to know some of the details. And boy, we could go for months, at least hours, kind of talking about every little detail of this, which unfortunately we don't have time to. But the idea is we're going to create a certificate signing request. We're going to generate the request. And then also we're gonna get this file, right? And there's a piece of it in there that we're gonna end up wanting. And there's a couple ways to do this. Typically you're gonna want to go grab that, highlight it, copy it, maybe paste it to another file because we're gonna need it later. AES, same thing, right? Hey, we're gonna go in and we're gonna look at the server certificates. We're gonna add. In this case, we're trying to get this. The way they're going to want to do it is by adding. It assumes they don't make it obvious. This is hey, let's go create a CSR, as opposed to I already have the cert. Let's just import it. So it's going to initiate a CSR form, the same kind of fields that we have on the form. We're going to hit apply. It's going to go ahead and give you that file that we're going to use later, right? So I'm kind of gathering up all of my CSRs. You may not do this the same way, in real life. These may not be all expiring at the same time, which might give you some extra time. But you're going to go in and create the CSR. You're going to go give that CSR to your certificate authority and create that cert. So these give you some options here as to ultimately what we're looking for. But, media server, we're going to go into the key store, and because we've already done all of our trust stuff. In this case, we're creating a new CSR. So we're creating new, it's going to come in and give you yet another form to fill out, right? That is ultimately going to help you generate that cert. All right, again, the CSR to get the cert. Media gateways, this is a little bit tricky, right? This is command line. Avaya doesn't have a web interface for a media gateway, as we all probably know. And so we're doing it via command line. And interestingly enough, the gateways don't have a cert CSR system itself. So we just create it somewhere else, which kind of complicates some things because now I have to do some manual joining of the identity cert, and there's a private key that gets in there. So because if you notice, I'm not in the gateway, I'm in Windows, or maybe I'm on a Linux server, and I have to use a command to create a CSR with certain things. This is the same kind of stuff that would show up on the form that you filled out, but we're doing it via command line. And we're going to go use OpenSSL to do that. And it's going to create a file that we're going to use later on, the same way we're going to do it with all of these devices, right? But again, last but not least, we're going to do the same. Let's generate a CSR on the SBC. Say we've already kind of been here when we were loading the trust certs, but in this case, we're going to install, but we're going to generate that CSR. Again, we've got a form to fill out. So again, hopefully you see the pattern here. I've got stuff I need to tell it. A lot of these things will be consistent until we get down to the subject alternative name. That's usually where there's differences. Um, and Nick kind of highlights here, the SBC requires some goofy things for them to say, hey, I've got an IP address and I've got a DNS entry. That's not typical, right? Usually we just give it the DNS, the FQDN of what we want to call this thing. But again, it just goes to my earlier point of Avaya did not make any of this consistent for us, which can be painful. Uh, and I guess last but not least, for our system manager. But this is, we put this last because this is actually, because it is an enrolled device, I don't have to go through the CSR process because it's automatic, right? And so we'll see how easy this becomes. I can go in here into the same service, go to inventory, manage my elements, find the thing, which in this case is my system manager. I want to manage my identity certs in this case. I'm highlighted on trusted certs, but I'm pointing to identity certs. And it'll bring up the certs that I already have in here, but I can just highlight the one. It'll show me the current values, which you can just look that, okay, this expires on 2025, November 6th, right? Is when that thing was going to expire. Or is that the trust cert? No, I think that's the regular one. But
No,
that's
so
saying,
you would just hit the renew button and then it would renew it.
yeah. So that's
It's
kind of the beauty of it, right? You just, instead of having to create a CSR, you just hit renew and it'll come up and say, okay, well, is there anything you want to change here? This is what it looked like before. If we're good here, let's go ahead and keep this. And I hit commit, and all of a sudden it did the CSR process auto magically, right? So it grabbed the current information, it did what it needed to do, and automatically populated that. And you see, I've got some older dates in here. These aren't chronologically correct, but this would have been more current than the old demo cert that was in there originally. That, as we mentioned, has expired.
the only thing to note is with when you're dealing with any DRS enabled services, so that'd be anything system manager and so forth, for it to pick up the new identity certs, still even for current versions, you do have to restart those servers.
Yep.
So even though it's 2 clicks, you still have to reboot. That is going to be service impacting when you reboot them.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. So now we go into System Manager, the CA, the Certificate Authority, and we're going to take those CSRs and turn them into certificates.
Yep. Now, mind you, this process here is only going to be you're only doing this if System Manager is going to be generating your CA. So they're going to be the ones generating these certificates. If you're using a third party or enterprise or something like that, these are not the steps you would use.
Yeah, you would take you still have to get them to a certificate authority, but it's, as we talked about,
the process is just slightly different. Yeah.
Whatever you've decided to use as your certificate authority, we're kind of assuming for the purposes of this that you're going to use your system manager as the certificate authority. But to Nick's point, if you're using somebody else, you've got to give that CSR to somebody else and have them create that cert either for you or if you're the one doing it, you'll know what to do with those CSRs. Again, the way Avaya does this is a little bit weird. We have to create an end entity for every single identity cert that we're going to create. And so I'll create an end entity, I'll import the CSR, I'll create the cert, and it actually then makes the end entity locked. You can't do anything with it again. You can never use it again. Interestingly, it doesn't delete it, right? It just kind of sits there locked. And there is no way to unlock it. The only way is to just create a new one. But this is the idea: is we're going to go in, we're going to click Add Entity, and it's going to have us fill out yet another form. Why it doesn't take the information from the CSR is a little weird. We're not even there yet, right? We're just creating the entity to start. Then we'll go ahead and grab the, for that particular entity, we'll grab the CSR. So we'll create a certificate from a CSR. It's going to then say, hey, great, back on this form, there was a place to put a username and a password, right, over here, back when we were creating that entity. And So when we do this, we're like, oh, I have to reference that entity. The way I do it is with a username and the quote unquote the enrollment code, or the password. Think of it that way, right? And then it's going to say, okay, go paste in the data from the CSR, or if you have it as a file, you can upload it, and it's going to look for the information between the begin certificate request and end certificate request. So on an actual CSR file, you might have a whole bunch of stuff, but it's going to ignore it and just look for that detail. Or if you'd like, open up the file in Notepad, copy the text, including those 2 lines, paste it in, and hit OK. Um, that is going to cause you to get your identity cert. It'll download it to you, and you're going to do that with all of your CSRs that you've created, right? We've gone through a whole bunch of them. We've gone through AES, we've gone through session. We didn't do session manager because I'd probably do the enrollment stuff, but it could. I do all of those things that we needed to get. So again, in theory, I've got a whole list of CSRs that I've created for all the different devices. I've done these steps in the CA for every single one of them separately, creating an end entity for every one of them, and then going in and creating the certs. So now I've got a whole bunch of certs. I've got to go put them where they belong. And so, as an example, take that new, freshly created identity cert. We're going to go into Communication Manager to actually upload it. And we're going to go into the web interface. We're going to go down to security. We're going to go to server application certificates. It's going to come up. I'm going to say add. And I'm going to enter in, the file, where I had quote unquote downloaded, which is actually uploading it. Put it in there. Put the name of the file. Hit open. It's going to ask me to check where do I want to put it? Do I want to put it on just the communication manager? Do I want to put it on the web server? And it'll now show up as an identity cert inside communication manager, applied to certain services. So you can see Nick grayed out. This is one of his again, where he's got an identity cert and he put it on everything except for the edge friendly stuff. So we put it on authentication, communication manager, web server, and remote logging.
So the only thing to note on here is once you hit submit on, like, you upload that cert, you assign it to different buckets and all that type of stuff, that cert will be the only one on your system for an identity cert. So old ones will no longer be active for new communication or new sessions that start at that point. If you are on an older system, so older than 10.1, so that's the 8.1.3 release and before, you do have to do a full reset system 1 in order to pick up those new identity certs. When you do that, some phones may drop that type of stuff, but it's not going to be a full reset system 4. But you do need to restart older versions of CM to pick up that identity cert. If you upload it and you don't do that reset system 1 in a timely fashion, you will start to see certain devices just drop off randomly without a whole lot of rhyme or reason, because what's happening is CM is going to try to present a new cert. It's not quite there yet. It's going to fail on those TLS handshakes.
Okay, that's good. Hey, we've got to do that on every one of these. I'm going to breeze through these because we have 2 minutes left. But
by the way, folks, we are going to go over by a few minutes here. So if you do need to drop, please do. But we are going to be continuing recording here, so you can refer to these slides later on.
That sounds good. Thanks, Nick. So we're going to, again, same the SBC, we're going to install them. I like the SBC's use of this, right? Install, I'll pick a certificate, name it, choose what your certificate file is, your chain, your intermediate chain.
The main thing to note with this one here is you do need to install a fresh copy of what they call that trust chain file. So essentially, this is going to be something provided by your CA. It could be your system manager root cert. If you have a third-party certificate, it might be their root cert and all the intermediate certs. You do have to upload that when you install a new cert. No other devices require you to upload that. System manager or the SBC does. The other thing to note too is if you've generated a CSR, it generated a key file in the background. You're going to have to pick which key file that you want to associate that cert with, and that's what's shown there on the bottom.
Interestingly enough, most devices in the real world actually they want both of those. They want the key, they want the cert, and they want the full chain, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting how Avaya ends up doing this. Um, again, let's assume we've deployed these identity certs to the servers. We are not talking about uploading identity certs into clients. That's also a thing. When you want to do mutual authentication, we'll load identity certs on the clients as well. We are not going down that path with this conversation. That's a pretty deep conversation. So that's why you notice we haven't installed an identity cert on a phone. It's on the servers, and the services on those servers. And we're going to go through and we're going to just make sure that we think everything's where they need to be. And as I mentioned, the very last step of this is to put your money where your mouth is. And okay, if you believe you did it right, um, go ahead and remove trust of that old certificate authority. In this case, maybe it's the demo cert, maybe it's changing something else. You're basically saying, hey, communication manager, I no longer want you to trust anything signed by this old certificate authority. So we're going to go into the trust certs. We're going to highlight that particular root certificate and we're going to remove it. All right. And we'll do our potentially system reset one, depending on what version you have. And that should wipe that out. And communication manager will no longer trust those older certs. We have to do that on the phones. This has nothing to do with the identity certs per se. I'm just going in and saying, hey, J179, I no longer want you to trust that old demo cert. I only want you to trust my new System Manager CA cert. That's the only cert that I want you to do. And me, I'm a fan of don't actually delete it. Just comment the old one out and create a new one. That way, if you're like, ooh, I did something wrong, you don't have to remember what it looked like. You can go back and uncomment out the old one and modify as needed. But in this model, you can see I'm keeping my new certificate authority root cert and deleting the old one. That is the process. Again, you can see we could go for days.
It's just that easy.
It is just that Avaya didn't do us any favors. And hey, when you talk to, as a user group, voicing your concerns is how they start realizing, hey, I need to add some features. I need to change some of this. We need to enhance our certificate management. Those are all good things.
Jump forward here a few slides here quick.
Yeah.
So automation.
Yeah.
So
yep.
People have asked a lot of questions like automation. How do we make this easier? Well, so we mentioned a few things here with the DRS enabled services. Again, that's going to be the session managers, branch session managers, ADS, Breeze. They have the ability to automatically pull down certs from system managers. So not fully automated. Generally, it's going to require a few clicks. We kind of showed that really quickly as far as what that is. Almost always, it does require a server restart. However, the rest of the Avaya tooling, Communication Manager, AAS, Aura Messaging, CMS, POM, all those other things, they don't offer any automation at all right now. So definitely talk to your Avaya reps, talk to your business partners, tell them that this is important. And, at the very least, to get a consistent dashboard for us to be able to do automation with this, is particularly as certs start expiring quicker and quicker. But outside of the Avaya environment, there's a lot of tooling that already exists out there today. So if you are responsible for other types of services, really where the industry is kind of going is one of two ways. One is tooling using the Acme protocol. So that's a full IETF RFC there that allows you to build in automation into web servers, into proxies, into anything that can speak TLS. The neat thing about the Acme protocol is it builds in that CSR process. It knows about trust certs. It knows about all that stuff, and it does it all for you. Generally, you're going to be given a login and a password, or you have to do some sort of authentication to tell people that, hey, I own a particular domain. And then the Acme protocol knows, okay, you've got these credentials. I'm going to go download this cert. I'm going to go generate it, install it, activate it on the server. So there's not a whole lot you're going to have to do. If you want more information about that, I typically go to Let's Encrypt, which
I
is
do too.
a free service. So you can get free certs. They only give them to you for 7 days at a time or 30 days at a time, but it is free and it does allow for automation. I know, Dave, you said you use Zero SSL for yours.
I actually I started using Zero SSL, but I moved to Let's Encrypt as well.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
like that better. Yeah.
The neat thing too, though, is most of the major third-party certificate authorities are allowing endpoints to start to talk Acme. Some of them are a little bit slower than others to roll that out, but generally, industry-wide, we're seeing a lot of them start to support Acme for their end customers, which is amazing because this is the only way we're going to get out of some of these holes. The other thing is for load balancers. A lot of my peers, I know, for example, are putting their telephony services and the rest of their stuff behind load balancers. That means that the public connects that load balancer and then it talks privately to your end servers or like your servers and services behind that. The neat thing about that is then you only have to worry about one or a few SSL certs that maybe you go and refresh every 7 days or something like that. And you can build some automation on that. Or even if you don't, you're only dealing with one server every so often as opposed to thousands of servers all the time.
And to be clear, a lot of these things are called load balancers, and we're actually just using a proxy feature of the load balancer. So it doesn't
Yep.
mean I have to load balance. It doesn't mean I have to have a million different session managers to load balance between or something like that, right? I can still use just the proxy functionality of those devices, and some of those that Nick and I use are on this page.
Yep. So like CertBot is the one. It's actually done by the EFF, so the Electronic Freedom Foundation built this tool to be able to update certs and all that type stuff. CertBot is kind of like the one most people use. I know, Dave, you've played with the acme.sh before, which is just a bash script to automate some of this stuff. When you're in the container environment and in that type of world, traffic is a very popular one as well.
Mhm.
I know that you've used also Caddy on some things
I
before.
like Caddy. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's easier for me, but
And then if you get into the enterprise space, F5 is kind of the big daddy for these reverse proxies and load balancers and that type of stuff. But there's quite a few of them out there as well.
agreed. I'd love to say, Nick, that we have time for questions. Speaking of traffic, um, but I don't know that we do.
Right. But definitely utilize the IUG discussion forums for any types of
Oh,
questions. Both
please.
Dave and I
Yeah.
go and peruse those on occasion, plus a whole bunch of other really smart people that be happy to answer your questions. And then Perla, do you want to go and read us out?
Absolutely. Thank you both so much. And thank you to those of you who stuck around. This is all really, helpful information. So once again, thank you to our presenters for taking the time to speak to us today and to all of you who stuck around. As a reminder, this webinar was recorded and will be available for on-demand viewing. And to continue engaging in discussions like this and to access more technical conversations and resources, as Nick alluded to, we encourage you to visit iaug.org. There, you can learn more about our councils, committees, other opportunities to get involved and volunteer, and you can have more of your questions answered by, again, really smart people. Please make sure to complete the short evaluation that will pop up as you exit the webinar. And from all of us at IAUG, thank you so much and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, all.
All right. Thanks again.